So you've just been illuminated to the world of Pokemon investing, and it can be an absolute mess. Cards double in price in over a few weeks, sealed products that rise with no end in sight, and you begin learning about sets being reprinted, and you start entering an entire new Pokemon card economy. Though while it is sometimes good vibes, it's not always, because newcomers may make mistakes which ultimately negatively impact them, which you're going to learn about in this video. Though while all these aspects of mixing collecting and investing are enjoyable, there are failures that every Pokemon investor has made, and the purpose of this video is that you don't make the same mistakes. So think of this video as a speed run to get you up to date. Now, mistakes in general are interesting because they are technically failures, right? And failures and mistakes are just normal parts of learning skills. In fact, the best way we improve in life is when we fail and rebound. This video is unique because it actually aims to shed light on common costly mistakes so you don't need to make the same ones. Now, truth be told, there's no Pokemon investing manual. It's a relatively new field that we're all kind of making sense of. However, you may be thinking, oh, it's Pokemon cards. These things are just cards. You're being ridiculous. You can't invest, blah, 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 blah. But man, when a pack fresh Moonbreon is worth more than a brand new PS5 Pro, you kind of need to pay attention because people are willing to pay the big bucks. Though, for you to succeed, you need to actually learn what collectors and enthusiasts and investors will pay the big bucks for. I mean, that hollow bent Machamp you just bought thinking was a smart play was actually probably trash. So moving forward, let's get the big one out of the way, which is mistake number one, buying vintage singles based off nostalgia. Now, this is the most common mistake I've seen, especially when re-entering the hobby after a long time. So you probably know how this goes, right? You've been reintroduced to the hobby. Maybe you started collecting again with Pokemon 151, and then you start looking at your older cards from your childhood, and you begin researching your nostalgic sets. And then you remember that first edition Slowking, or you remember that vintage Suicune you pulled, or maybe you go back to some singles from Skyridge and you start loading up on them thinking you're making good plays. Now, this is a dangerous place to be, as you could be loading up on these singles, but the issue is that these singles are relevant to you and incredibly specific to your experience of collecting. So if you're buying them and they are damaged, they have some whitening or some rough corners, you could be buying some serious junk without being aware. So if you actually try to offload these in the future, who knows if the buyer market is there for these cards. Now, if you just want these in your collection, that's fine, but you can actually make more strategic plays with your purchases, so you can buy your nostalgic items, but you can also make sure that they're the correct versions so they're not just dead weight with your collection. So one card I personally love is the Neo Genesis Murkrow. Now, this card is super nostalgic to me, as I actually remember pulling it as a kid, and it was the first dark card I ever saw as a kid, right? And I actually couldn't wrap my head around it. So during that time, this was a huge deal. We both couldn't stop staring at it. Though this experience is probably very unique to me, and while it would be nice for my collection, I would also need to understand that it is much more of a collectible than an investment. If I sold this card in the future, I could likely lose money, right? So before buying it, I would need to understand that this is much more of a collectible than an investment. I need to make that distinction before I buy. I will need to understand that it may not sell for the same price as it is a personal niche collectible in my collection. Now, it's not a bad purchase if you're buying it for your own collecting purposes, but if you're thinking you're gonna sell it for the same price or that it's gonna grow in value, then you are mistaken and you shouldn't be doing that. Though again, if it is for your collection, it doesn't matter. So this is just important information to know. There are purchases that are unique to you, and then there are purchases that are fantastic for your personal collection, which is great. Though if you think that these are gonna rise in the future, you could be very mistaken and then you'll just end up disappointed. Some cards have a better chance of rising in the future, though usually some of those nostalgic niche cards are not the type of cards that will explode in the future. Now, before I continue, I just want to say, if you have been enjoying the content, please feel free to like the video. Also, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. This channel covers Pokemon collecting, investing, and I do box breaks as well, so I'd love to have you on board. And also, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you can also join channel memberships and use these awesome custom built emojis. The link to join is in the description of this video. Now, mistake number two follows a bit of wisdom from the first mistake, and that is not being able to distinguish between collection and investment. So let's make this simple, right? Collecting is personal and investing is growth. Now, I'm gonna be the first person to tell you, in my very honest opinion, making purchases purely for growth is just really, really boring. I mean, while it's very likely that your sealed product will rise over time, it's not really an enjoyable way to be in this hobby. Most of us who invest in collectibles also love it as well. If we wanted to just focus on pure financial growth, there are much better places to be placing our money. The unique aspect of this hobby is that it has a place to kind of mix your hobbies with a little bit of chance of product growth. People who love to invest in collectibles do so because it offers an enjoyable way to potentially see some growth on their favorite collectibles. It's really not that complicated when you break it down, right? I really believe in finding a happy medium between what you enjoy collecting and hopefully seeing potential growth on your products. Though that's why it's important to buy what you genuinely love collecting as well. So an example of this would be, let's say that you really love Paldea Evolved, right? And you genuinely enjoy the set. So because of this, you purchase a few booster boxes to keep them sealed. Well, if you actually like Paldea Evolved and you love it as a collectible, then this essentially becomes a win-win, because if it rises in value and follows the history of previous sealed product, you've made a sensational purchase with some gains on your product. Now, if the value doesn't go up or it stays stagnant, you could one day rip open this set, you know, who knows, maybe with your kids, or you could do it with some friends, or you could film a video of you ripping it open in a few years and post it on YouTube. The point is that you're still enjoying the set regardless of which way it goes. And I mean, the same rule applies for singles. You could strategically focus on which singles to buy that fit your collection and investment. Though it should be said that singles are way more volatile and less predictable than sealed product. Like right now, I see so many people jumping onto the One Piece train, but the problem is, if you're not a fan of One Piece and you're buying it because you think it's a hot investment, you're just in a losing position, because if the product doesn't rise or reprints set you back, you're just going to be sour because you're buying something you genuinely don't like collecting, or you don't want to even rip open one day. So always focus on having a genuine love for what you invest in when it comes to collectibles, because it should be said, this is a hobby first. It's not some money-making machine. The potential gains are just a bonus to a hobby that you genuinely enjoy. Now, mistake number 3 is focusing on adding volume rather than having a tight and liquid collection. Now, I get it, right? You love to show off a massive collection. It's cool. You can flip through like hundreds and hundreds of pages of binders. And truth be told, right now, your binder will never look better with the introduction of these trainer gallery cards and illustration rares. But you kind of have to remember what I just spoke about. There's a balance between collecting and investing. Collecting binders and binders of amazing artworks is great if you want to add that to your collection. But I wouldn't be thinking that you're sitting on a gold mine of just collecting these kind of cards. The truth is, in 5 years, a lot of these illustration rares may not rise too much in value because there's so many of them out there. We can even see how much trainer gallery cards have plummeted a few years later. What's far better is thinking of having a high value collection that's also quite liquid. Meaning, if you were to list it on eBay as an auction for some reason, that there would be an enormous buyer pool that would be ready to buy these and ready to launch for the grails that you have. You know, these include like your PSA 10 Greninja special illustration rare, a PSA 10 Moonbryon, or a PSA 10 Magic Carp illustration rare. These are always going to have a far more dedicated buyer pool than something like a PSA 8 Great Tusk EX. This means rather than focusing on just loading up on PSA 8s and PSA 7s of particular illustration rares to just show off your slabs and add to your collection, try having a laser-like focus on having a smaller collection, but a collection that is actually highly desired. So I'm going to actually give you an example, right? And this is purely from my own perspective. So this is my own perspective, right? If someone offered me one PSA 10 Greninja or a binder full of trainer gallery cards and illustration rares that equate to the same value of the PSA 10 Greninja, I would choose the Greninja every day of the week. Now you might think, oh, well, that's crazy because I'm getting one item versus hundreds of smaller cards that all have their own individual chances of rising. But honestly, as a business owner and someone who understands the value of time, it doesn't make sense for the binder, and here's why. Firstly, the Greninja would be one item, one sale, meaning to actually realize the money or the gains, it would take a very small amount of time to list it, take photos, and sell it. I could concentrate the effort to get the best results. Whereas the other cards, even though they have the potential to make more money, I would need to consider the time spent listing these items individually, the time spent packing each item of these cards and individually adding them in top loaders, and the time it takes to write out shipment details, along with the time it would take to individually take all these cards to the post office. Even if the binder may have realized more profit in the future, the time spent individually listing these and focusing on the sales would probably put me at a huge loss because of the hours put in. So this is kind of where you kind of have to be a bit more business-like with the decisions you make, and a good way is to think of your own hourly rate. Your personal time is significant. Time is the most valuable currency we have. So we need to look after it. That's why I actually prefer a more tight-knit collection over a huge collection, especially when it comes to selling. While it is true that individual cards and products can move differently, it's also true that price rises and dips usually come in waves. So usually they affect Pokemon cards on a widespread scale. So if cards are rising, it's likely your chase cards will also be caught in that potential positive wave. And if they are falling, then the chase cards you own will also dip with that negative wave. You know, there's downs and ups in life, and there are obvious outliers and cards that defy the rules, but this is based on a general outlook, right? Another area is that having such a massive collection could also put selling products one day in the too hard basket. So always try to focus on quality over volume. Now, mistake number 4 is buying a product that is currently being scalped. So it has to be said that investing in Pokemon is not scalping, because scalping is scalping. In fact, you could argue that good Pokemon investors are the complete opposite of scalpers. Scalpers look for a quick profit, meaning they try to buy something and flip it immediately to make some money. The whole premise of Pokemon investing is very different. Investing in collectibles is a long-term investment, and market ups and downs don't really affect the Pokemon investor, as it's more about time in the market than timing the market. Also, if an item is being scalped, I could speak very confidently that many people who invest in collectibles would just wait it out and not bother buying it. So a good example of this was Japanese 151 when it was released in 2023. I personally didn't bother touching it, as I could see it was just way too in demand and I wouldn't be able to buy it at retail price or below that. And I'm happy that I actually waited it out, because the next year the reprint happened and I picked it up for a very good price. I didn't go in the market when there were scalpers involved. So more often than not, the best time to buy a booster box or sealed product is when the hype is completely down and you can get it for the best possible price you can. If a product is being scalped and everyone is in on it, it's selling for well above retail price. So you got to be okay with missing out. Nothing bad will happen. That's why it's better to learn which Pokemon are popular and what characteristics you need to look out for, which are essential. You'll actually be able to start forecasting a set's success in the future based on the cards inside the set, the pull rates, the general demand, and how well the cards grade. All these factors come into consideration, which determine the final value of a sealed product's worth in the future. Now, mistake number 5 is grading your cards outside of the big 3 grading companies. Most people understand that grading your cards is expensive, right? And newcomers can get tempted to use cheaper grading services as a way to cut costs. Like you might be thinking, oh, well, what's the difference? My cards are still being encapsulated, they are getting assessed and protected, so it's all the same. Well, not really, and I'm gonna explain what I mean. Grading your Pokemon cards is not something you should try cut costs on by shopping around. If someone tells you to shop around or that they know a company that grades cards cheaper, avoid that advice like the plague. Grading your cards should really only be done at PSA, Beckett Grading Service, or CGC. Anything else is wasting your money. Now, believe it or not, this actually has nothing to do with which company grades cards better. It's far more about maintaining the status quo. PSA, BGS, and CGC aren't just trusted for their grading, they've built a reputation that collectors rely on. Their dominance is actually upheld by the sheer number of people who have already invested in them. These cards graded by these companies consistently hold their value, making them the safest choice for maintaining and growing your collection. By sticking with these established grading companies, you align with the market's long-standing preferences, ensuring your cards are recognized and respected by the largest audience. Now, the only real exception that comes to mind is for Japanese cards in particular, which you can actually use the new ARS Japanese grading service, which is actually seeming to be a competitor which competes with the big 3, though I would only do this for your Japanese singles, not for any of your English singles. Grading your cards with the right business is essential, as you don't want to waste your money, because a lot of people can waste money when they start out, and there's actually 5 investments in particular which are a total waste of money, and the exact 5 things I'm talking about are revealed within this video right here. Within this video here, I look over the worst Pokemon investments which you should avoid. Click that video on screen right now and you can learn more about it there. I'll see you there.